Well, hello and welcome to the final Nudge Presents Spotlight on FASD. This is the fifth one, and what we've done so far the past 4 weeks, or 4 podcasts, is cover a range of issues and a range of topics on fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. And now we are handing the baton over to Jess and Claire because they are going to move on with their own Spotlight on FASD podcast, which we'll talk about in a bit. But first of all, just if anyone is watching or listening to this for the first time, tell me a little bit about what FASD is, just as a recap.
Okay, so fetal alcohol spectrum disorder is organic, lifelong brain damage that happens when alcohol is consumed during pregnancy. And it is, when alcohol is accidentally consumed during pregnancy, because that is the bulk of the case. So it is, I hope that my voice is portraying no stigma, because there is no stigma. These things happen. And it impacts children. So the developing fetus, the impact can be huge, and then impacts children and young people into their lives, and then into adulthood. In so many over 200, a minimum of 200 different ways, from learning disabilities to muscle problems to joint problems to heart defects, hearing, sight, dental problems, mental health problems. So many comorbid diagnoses come from it, and quite often the bulk, in my experience, the bulk of the problems come from no diagnosis, a misdiagnosis, and then the secondary impact of that, like for example, trying to navigate 3 children with brain damage through mainstream education with no diagnosis. The impact on their mental health then is...
And not having the strategies and the supports and everything.
So like having a child with diabetes and you don't know they've got diabetes, and so you are not altering their life at all, or their surroundings. So that's what it is. It's something that tens of thousands of children live with. Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. Hundreds of thousands. It massively outnumbers autism. It outnumbers autism, Down syndrome and cerebral palsy combined, but because it's uncomfortable to talk about, it's still so few people know about it. But that's changing. Like the tide is, there's a bit of a tsunami happening now, which is brilliant, and that's been a long, long time coming because it's been around forever. But like we say, we know better now, so we need to do better now, dealing with it.
Will that heat pick up on the?
No, I mean it's over there, and it'll be more.
And I think we've had the absolute pleasure of working with 2 of your children so far, nearly 3, but we've managed to find a permanent solution in that respect. But I think this is the thing, we don't hear a lot about this. But as a result of doing these podcasts, I mean, I've interviewed somebody this week who's got a child with FASD. We've had 2 referrals for young people who have FASD on their paperwork when it comes through. So it is becoming more and more, which I think is really important, because obviously, as we discussed in previous podcasts, that we're going to be seeing an official framework diagnostic. In England, which obviously, Jess, you've got experience in Scotland and you know about that element of it up there, but in England it's not.
I want to say something about nudge there though. So these things, the fact that you are hearing more about it and you're getting children referred to you, that's like not an accident. You, as a provider, you were the first provider of lots that I had dealings with where I told you what the situation was, you absolutely believe, your first response was to fully believe it, and that's not a natural response, is it?
Not to FASD. No.
Not to FASD, it's like, really? And so you were like,
people don't see it.
You absolutely believed it. You took it so seriously. So now, I shout nudge education to everybody. So that hasn't happened by accident. You have opened your eyes to the situation that you're dealing with, realising that lots of the children on your caseloads have, whether diagnosed or not, have been exposed to alcohol in utero, and you've altered, nudge has shifted the emphasis, and so that's something that, nudge need to be applauded for, because...
Well, thank you, and if people want to find out about more, the website is nudgeeducation.co.uk. But moving forward with the, we've talked about things and what it is. Jess, do you want to talk about what's, it isn't, what the misconceptions that people have?
Yeah, I mean, there's an awful lot, and as Claire's just explained, it is caused by alcohol exposure when a fetus is exposed. But it's at any point during pregnancy, and what's really important to understand is that it's not necessarily women who are alcoholics. It can be caused by the smallest amount of alcohol. We all know that our bodies process alcohol differently to some of our friends who we know can drink much more than others, and so the impacts are so completely different. So it's really, really important to know that and understand that you may have had a drink or a couple of drinks before realising that you're pregnant, and it is those low levels, and that's why Claire was saying that it's so important that there's no shame or stigma or anything at all, because we didn't know. Yeah. And we do now, and that's the message.
I think the many people watching this, so FASD has been in the national press a lot the last couple of weeks, and there's been an outcry that the NICE quality standards, which are going to be introduced in January 2021, the briefings were made public, and some British Pregnancy Association, there was an outcry saying that because there's a suggestion that if alcohol is being consumed, it's to be noted on medical records for future reference, in case there's that little chance that anything starts to not go to plan with a child's development, then that can be referred back to, maybe we need to look down this road, with no stigma. And the way that it's being portrayed in the press is, this is like Handmaid's Tale, that women are being attacked, that women should be able to drink whatever they want in pregnancy, that they're going to be put on a list and they're going to be condemned for it, and it's, it could not be further from the truth. That decision comes from a place of compassion, and I know that. I sit on the NICE panel, and I know that the people around the table and the huge amount of females on the panel, and I just think that this is, I really feel strongly to get this across, because people have been exposed to such negativity around it over the last couple of weeks, who probably haven't been exposed to it at all, but this has been eye-grabbing. Big newspapers like the Times and Telegraph. So imagine that there was a range of detergent that could, it was dead popular, everyone used it, it was socially acceptable, it wasn't a big deal, chuck it in your trolley at the supermarket, nobody would question it, but it was really good value for money, and there was a tiny chance that if you used it when you were pregnant, it could cause some kind of neurodevelopmental damage to your baby. So most people who were trying to get pregnant would stop using it. Sometimes people would have used it for a little bit because they didn't know they were pregnant. Other times people were in the position to change their life and afford a different one, and so they continue to use it. But if at all of those medical interventions it was like, have you used this kind of detergent? Actually, I think I did. I think week 3 to 7 I did. There was a few loads of washing went through with it. Right, don't worry about it, we're going to make a note of it, because chances are you're going to be fine, nothing's going to happen. But if in 5 years' time, when your child's really struggling in school, we can look back at this and say, right, what we're not going to do is refer them to CAMS and put them on an ASD pathway, an ADHD pathway, all of the wrong pathways, and destroy their mental health and completely screw up their education. That's what we're not going to do in the first instance. Because of this little marker, we'll be able to go, let's go down this road first, and if it's not, then we'll go to these ones. And it's that simple. And it should have the amount of stigma that detergent would have attached to it.
Yeah, and it's interesting as well, isn't it? Because in culture as well, you know, British culture certainly, there's also that added stigma that if it's a woman that's doing it, you know, women drinking, or women drinking to excess, or women drinking at all, in some cases it's not something that's culturally acceptable. If it was lads down the pub, for example, the other way around, there probably wouldn't be as much of a stigma, which is interesting from a gender point of view, but also, as you said, alcohol is a pretty sticky label, especially as there's more focus around reducing alcohol intake as a nation. And I guess it is hard for people to go through.
And the importance of what Claire's just said and having that marker on the paperwork as well. Like I've worked with a lot of adopted families in different roles who have so much trouble, so many challenges trying to gain a diagnosis because they don't have that. And not having that marker on their records means that they can't get their children diagnosed, even though they're ticking every box, they know what it is they're dealing with, and that's preventing those children from accessing services. So that's it, you know, it's just, like Claire said, having that there, knowing which pathway to go down. Okay, great, we'll go down this pathway, we'll get the supports in place, we'll get the structures, do what we need to do, and it can completely alter that child's life.
Because when diagnosis doesn't come, or comes too late, that's when you're looking at the, you know, there's a lot of talk about life expectancy of FASD, it's in the mid-30s.
Yeah.
And that is, it's not a life shortening disability at all, but the repercussions of no diagnosis or a diagnosis too late on mental health, and then disengagement with education, which, you know, nobody knows more about that than you. That's when that life expectancy comes into play. So, you know, if we were to get an early, and you talk, I find myself saying like, oh, an early diagnosis, that would be fantastic. No, a timely diagnosis, instead it should be happening. It's not like doing anyone a huge favour. If we get a timely diagnosis, I can guarantee less money will need to be spent on that child throughout their lifetime, throughout education. You know, and that's what it, when it comes to services and local authorities, that's what it boils down to, and I understand that, and I don't say that in a derogatory way. That is the fact of the matter. They've got a pot of money, they've got a budget, it's got to spread through their whole community. So the money that we are wasting by trying to pretend that FASD just isn't happening, it's silly. It's really silly, and it's got to stop.
Being misunderstood through education, through adulthood, getting involved with criminal justice,
judicial system,
everything.
The money that's been spent there, and if the support had been in at the right place at the right time, you know, it doesn't need to be a massive deal. You can tick along with your life, and if things are all in place, you know, have a very productive life.
And I think that's the thing. One of the topics of the other podcast we did was about why now, wasn't it? And I think, I forget this specific statistic, we tweeted out a link to a story in The Guardian recently where, you know, within the adoption system, there's a massively high percentage of children in the adoption system. And obviously that's, you know, that's, you can see where the stigma comes from then. The reason why we can do it now is that, you know, our belief in education is that we don't treat the diagnosis, we treat the child. We work with that child, whether they've got, you know, any spectrum disorder or learning disability or not. But what you need is obviously a framework of support around that, because if you don't get that funding and you don't get that understanding of how to support that individual child, then, you know, they do end up down these pathways of poor mental health, poor physical health, you know, suicide, you know, this is the life shortening, and you don't see a lot of it's self-harm, it's the poor self-care that can lead to the shortening of life, not necessarily the conditions.
That is exactly where that average life expectancy comes from. It's suicide, it's drug and alcohol addiction, and it's going down a path because all the other paths are closed to them, because people are denying the fact that they've got brain damage. And it's not a, you know, so autism is a neuro difference. Autism is a neuro difference. FASD is brain damage, so there's a huge difference, massive overlap, but there is a huge difference between the two, and let's make no mistake about it, autism isn't brain damage, it's a neurodiversity. FASD is brain damage.
And I guess, you know, this is the point where we, as I say, pass over to yourselves. You will be moving forward with years and years of content on very specific topics which you can discuss now, I guess. So yeah, tell me a little bit, or tell the listeners a little bit about what areas you might cover and what your hopes are for your own podcast.
Do you remember what I feel like I'm talking about?
Everything. Yeah, I mean,
we're gonna
education.
So,
definitely.
like for me, this is how my brain works. So, like dental care, opticians, education, support from your family, stigma from your family, losing your support network, mums in the schoolyard, hypermobility, physiotherapy, the importance of an OT, how creative an FASD brain can be, how empathic, their strengths with animals, the importance of animals in their lives, how to navigate an EHCP, how to deal with your school when they think your child doesn't need an EHCP. Everything, absolutely everything. We're going to talk about the good, the bad and the ugly, and there's not a lot of the ugly stuff.
So Claire's just reeled off like a whole list of her life. Like,
that was just last week. That was just last week.
Quite a history.
Yeah, but we're going to like get into detail of every single one. We're going to talk about the research behind it, all the stats, the facts, the figures, where the thinking has come from, and it will be, you know, built up with those personal stories, those experiences.
We're going to put all of those areas under a microscope and then shoot off. You know, we might have 30 episodes about one particular aspect of education, because it's just so huge, and what we ask from our listeners, our followers, when we start to pick them up, is we want to be guided by you. What do you want us to talk about? What do you want to ask us? What do you want us to find out about? We've already got guests lined up in the world of FASD, both professionals, academics, lived experience, tons and tons, and you know, we knew the people we wanted to be involved, but then also people have approached us from the world of FASD, which is really heartening for us to think that so rapidly this is being picked up by influential people in it. Just, I feel like this huge hamster wheel that I have been trying to move with 3 kids inside of it and dragging all my schools along with us, and I've had, you know, education has been horrific for my children. However, I've had, on the whole, a wonderful experience with the professionals within those institutions that I've had to work with, and it's crippled them as much as it's crippled my children. That the fact that they haven't been able to make it work for them, and the fact that they have known that my children were going into an institution every day, or if I could get them in, that was damaging them. So, you know, we're gonna talk about, and I think the hamster wheel is starting to move faster and faster because so many people are getting inside now.
Yeah.
And we get you know, feedback from people, and we're seeing a good amount of people listening and watching these. So hopefully, you know, as you carry on that, you'll get that kind of momentum, that snowball rolling down the hill. Well, that's great. And where can people find you? What if they're looking for you online? What are your social media?
Instagram and Twitter. Spotlight on FASD.
And I am about to set up a Facebook page, because I know there are there's a lot of people who use Facebook, a lot of support groups, so link it up to them, so that makes it a little bit easier. And then that's everything. People can then access us everywhere then.
Yeah, and there will be a YouTube channel as well. We will continue to film and record the audio, so we'll still do the webcast, podcast.
Yeah, so we're going to continue with our spotlight on FASD, but we're just kind of going it alone. We've launched it with Nudge Education at the beginning, because that made sense, because it was education that brought me to Nudge. So you know, we wanted to launch this together. We're going to go off our own separate way, but also obviously still deeply entrenched in Nudge.
Yes, of course. You're not getting rid of us that easy. So that's good. And as ourselves, we've really enjoyed doing this as well. It's the first time we've done a webcast and a podcast, and I think, you know, we've got experts in a lot of fields, so we might do future things about anxiety, ADHD, the system itself. You know, we might even draft a couple of you back in for working around EHCPs, because a lot of parents are quite confused, and there's a lot of language and legal elements that people just don't understand, so we wanted to help and advise on that. But yeah, well, it's been an absolute pleasure. So thank you, and I can't believe it's the end of this
I know,
little mini
yeah.
series. So again, just to remind people, it's Spotlight on FASD on Twitter and Instagram. And if you're interested in the work that we do, we are a national intervention service for children that are disengaged. So head to middleeducation.co.uk for more information.